Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Today we're on chapter 6, which is another Nikolai chapter in King of Scars. Now at first I wasn't very excited to get to another Nikolai chapter because we just came from a really exciting Nina chapter. You guys might remember I was pretty suspicious about everything that was going on. But this chapter ended up being great and was full of a lot of interesting information. So Nikolai and the gang are making their way through this 15-mile long tunnel that leads from the Gilded Bog back to the Grand Palace. And this tunnel actually comes out by this man-made waterfall that they have near the royal stables, so if he's coming out of there, it doesn't look too suspicious.
Keyword from the last video, right?
As they were making their way through the tunnel, they were talking about how there's this large group of pilgrims that have gathered outside the palace. And some of them are even demanding to speak to the king. So when Nikolai emerges from this secret tunnel, right away he notices his two most trustworthy guards.
And are they really so trustworthy, Nikolai?
Will we soon find out? Nikolai says that the two of them look so similar that they could be brothers, but in personality they couldn't be more different. One's always laughing and very full of himself and confident, and the other one is very shy and can barely even look you in the eye to speak. Nikolai asks if he's missed anything interesting while he was gone, and they say that Kuei actually set someone on fire. I'm not even surprised, but I was really happy to hear about him. And Nikolai's like, yeah, I'm really glad that he's Zoya's problem. As Nikolai is talking to his guards, he starts to speak to Isaac in a different language and notes how he has an affinity for languages. And Nikolai thinks this is great because he gets a little practice, but this kind of worries me because I'm like, he's very shy and timid and keeps to himself and is really good at all these languages. Is he really that trustworthy? I don't know, maybe I'm just super paranoid. Like 6 of Crows totally destroyed all of my trust in these people in the books. Nikolai decides to go to the Little Palace before making his way back to the Grand Palace, and they have to pass through the woods to get there. Nikolai says that he's spent plenty of time there, but he always feels like he's walking into foreign territory every time he goes through. He actually says, leaving the new world behind for some place where dark bargains might be struck, which is kind of an odd way to think about things. But then I thought, hey, wasn't Alina really freaked out by the woods on her way to the Little Palace too? So I had to look it up, and I got to bust out Shadow and Bone. And can I just say that after reading just the first few chapters of King of Scars, it's making me want to go back and reread this whole Grishaverse trilogy. But I did find in Shadow and Bone that Alina actually says, we entered a thick stand of trees, large enough that it felt like a small wood, and passed through a long dark corridor where the branches made a dense braided roof above us. The hair rose on my arms. I had the same feeling that I'd had as we were crossing the canal, the sense of crossing the boundary between two worlds. I'm pretty sure the first time I was reading this that I thought it was more of a metaphorical,
crossing between two worlds.
But Nikolai has the same feeling. He's going into foreign territory. I'm not sure if there are any other examples of this in the first book, but if you guys know, please leave it in the comments down below. And then the first thing I kind of thought after reading this was maybe the Darklings struck some kind of bargain there, or maybe his mother did, because they were there at the start of everything. Nikolai ends up dismissing this feeling as like, oh, I should just stop reading all of these novels.
Filling your head with ideas.
As we're reading a novel, After they pass through this section of forest, Nikolai finally makes his way to the war room. And usually they meet at the Grand Palace, but this is the place where they talk when they really can't have anyone listening. Nikolai even says this was the Darkling's chamber, and he was a man who knew how to keep a secret. Zoya and Genya are already waiting there for him, and he makes note about how Genya's kefta is detailed with a golden thread that matches the sun on her eye patch, and it's in remembrance of Alina. And Nikolai actually added an ascending sun to his house sigil, and he says that he did this to please the public just as much as it had some sentimental value to him. Nikolai even says that he feels Elena's presence with them, almost like she's following them from room to room, and her presence is as tangible as the summer heat. But he also mentions that she's long gone. I was really happy that we got to talk about Alina a little bit more. I'm wondering if we're actually going to maybe get to see a little bit of her in this book, or maybe even the next one. It's been a while for me since I've read the first series. Elena almost feels like a bit of an enigma to me, and she just feels like a distant memory to me too, because we just keep hearing this mention of her.
Oh, the Sun Saint, the Sun Saint, the Sun Saint.
And basically they're at this war meeting to discuss a whole bunch of bad news. Nikolai lets them know that the Kirch and the Merchant Council know all about their little winged pancakes, and they're claiming that they just want to use them for their defenses against against the Shu and the Fjordans if they ever make a blockade. But everyone pretty much knows better than this. So the Kerch have been pretty much in control of sea trade for a really long time. But now the Zemeni are actually building up their fleet and they're establishing a lot of trade routes, so they don't need the Kerch anymore. And this really worries the Kerch Merchant Council because they'll finally have competition. And Zemeni is actually a lot better off than Kerch, it seems. Says they have extensive farmland, they have tons of timber, they can mine their own resources. Nikolai even says how jealous he is to have this country that's actually able to grow and flourish and not have to worry about an enemy above and below you. So the council are weighing their two options, and they even compare it to picking the right dance partner. The Zemeni are clearly stronger allies. It's also mentioned that they lent them food and they were the first ones to give them aid when no one else would. But on the other hand, the Kerch pretty much have all of the money and they can control whether or not they forgive all of these Ravkan loans that have added up over the years. And they could still provide a lot more funds. So everyone's discussing, which one would be better. And there's really no clear winner of the two. But Nikolai says, don't be in any type of rush. If we pick the wrong partner, it will really ruin the night.
Which is a very Nikolai thing to say.
As they're discussing this, Nikolai just whips out the little prototype of the antidote for Parem. And this makes Genya really emotional. It says that she gets a tear in her eye. The big problem they're finding with this antidote is that it takes about 10 times more plants to make the antidote to the Parem than it does just to make one single dose of the actual drug. This is definitely a big problem because their intelligence is actually saying that the Fjerdans and the Shu are already coming up with their own versions of Parem. This all ties back to which ally they're going to end up choosing. If you give the Kerch the plans to the winged pancakes, aka Ismarzia, then you basically lose the Zemeni as allies. And in Novi's Yem, that's basically where all of the Jurda plants are and all of the vast farmland that they would need to help make this antidote. So by going with the Kerch, you lose them, you lose any chance of helping any Grisha. And that just means more Grisha are going to be enslaved and weaponized by Parem.
But
if you say no to the Kerch, then they won't even have any money to equip the first army.
don't worry, there's even better news coming.
Nikolai has to tell everyone that the monster made a little reappearance and that it's getting a lot stronger and more unpredictable. This really unnerves Genya, and for good reason. She was also attacked by the Darkling and these dark creatures that infected Nikolai with this
Beast.
Nikolai even says that the Darkling could have chosen to kill both of them, but he didn't. He decided to punish them instead.
It's like, yeah, he might have been an ancient power, but he's petty as hell.
Which is true, we can agree on that. David's not really sure why it's growing stronger all of a sudden because it was dormant for so long. But what David learned between Grisha theory and all of the journals that he read in the first series was that Grisha power can't create life, it can only manipulate living things. But when those limits are breached and you end up using the abomination, the dark magic, then there's always very serious repercussions. The Shadowfold is a great example of this. Now the Shadowfold is basically just this wasteland of dead sand. Nothing green can take hold and grow. They say it's as if the Darkling's power actually leached the life from the land. I'm wondering if the Darkling's power is also somehow leeching life from Nikolai, and that's why the creature is growing stronger. David explains that the power is very unpredictable because of where it came from, though he doesn't really have a lot of answers about the monster growing within Nikolai. Nikolai did try to get rid of it before. He subjected himself to extreme heat and cold, and brought in sun summoners to use their power on him, and he said that he felt like he's being
burned alive
from the inside, so that obviously didn't work. He even sought out the journals that David studied, but that just left him feeling even more frustrated and confused than before. And those failed attempts led him to go and visit the Bone Bridge. The reason he went there is because he thought there might be connection to this creature inside of him and this anomaly that happened. He even hoped that the saints would present him with some kind of miracle. The fact that the creature is growing stronger leaves Nikolai with a really big problem. He can't leave Ravka now. He can't travel anywhere, which is really suspicious for a king. And Nikolai's grand solution?
Throw a party.
He's gonna invite the Kerch, he's gonna invite the Zemeni, he's gonna invite the Fjordans, he's gonna invite the Shu, and he's gonna give the Kerch a little look at his winged pancakes. And I'm calling them winged pancakes from now on. I like it better than Ismarzia. It's cuter.
More delicious.
But he's not just going to show them the sub-prototypes.
He's going to blow them up.
Maybe even drown a couple of guys, fake drowning on the side. He wants Zoya to set up an acoustic map so they can basically spy on everybody that's there. They're all discussing what could be the reason behind this big party that you're planning on throwing. And my girl Zoya says, hey, this is how we're gonna find your bride. Nikolai's like, sure, you find me a list of candidates then to invite. Zoya's like,
Done.
This actually hurts Nikolai's feelings. He starts pouting. I can just hear him pouting.
She must really want to be rid of me if she already knows who I need to marry to save Ravka.
When are these two going to understand that they both like each other? Since they're going to be having this big lavish party with all of their enemies, Nikolai wants to do some extra checks on the palace staff. Foreshadowing! He tells them to assume that everyone is a spy or an assassin, which just makes me think that one of them is going to be a spy or an assassin. It's the quiet one. I know it's the quiet one. And speaking of assassins, the one in Crooked Kingdom that Inej killed, well, they say she's dead and they don't have to worry about her anymore. And this leads Nikolai to start thinking about how there actually could be a potential heir to the throne, since his dad was out there probably making illegitimate heirs. Zoya tells him, hey, there's always going to be this other heir, this false pretender, so
start making babies.
Get an heir to the throne. And later on, after Nikolai has his busy day of meetings and all that king type of stuff, him and Zoya finally get a chance to sit down and talk prospective brides. And Zoya lets him know right away, there's not a perfect choice. Right now, I kind of feel like I'm on the dating game, or that part of Shrek where they're listing all the princesses in the mirror.
Bachelorette number 1! She's from the Shoe Kingdom. She's second in line to the throne and first in her people's hearts. It's Princess Aerie!
Did you guys like that?
Bachelorette number 2 is 16, and that makes it a hard no from King Nikolai.
Now, on a more serious note, that makes Nikolai think of Alina, and Zoe's like, you're still pining over her, our little sun summoner. And she reminds him that he was only a few years older than our dear Bachelorette number 2 when he threw away the Lanistoff emerald at her, which if I was Zoya, I'd be pretty bitter about too. I was actually really surprised in this moment when Nikolai says he feels like a fool whenever he thinks about her and the fact that he proposed to her in the first place. He said he really just needed a friend at the time, maybe even more than a political alliance. Yet again, there was that
mask on, mask off thing.
Who was Nikolai being in the moment? Nikolai's like, of course I'm still mourning her. And then he says that he might have loved her.
He might have loved her. He might have loved her. Oh, it was this one.
And then he goes on to think about how the rejection still really stung. He thinks about how she was so close to the Darkling that maybe she said no because she sensed a darkness in him too. But basically for me, all along, it was Mal, very close, problematic second was the Darkling, and then Nikolai. I didn't think he was ever really right for her. I mean, I love him, but he wasn't right for our girl. Now our other girl, Zoya.
Bachelorette number 3. The Baroness Baratrova, coming in at age 50.
I'm not ageist or anything, but Nikolai gives that one a hard no. But she is a very wealthy widow with lands that are essential to their campaign.
Bachelorette number 4. His half-sister. Also a hard no.
I was not expecting one of the options of his potential brides to come up as being his half-sister. Then he starts to get vulnerable with Zoya, and he tells her the truth, which he only ever told Elena before. And he loved her and trusted her.
So maybe he's loving and trusting Zoya too?
He already knows that Zoya isn't going to baby him with this information or show him any kindness like Alina did. So I don't know why he whips out this miniature picture of his dad. Zoya takes one look at it and throws it into the fire. This really sets Nikolai off, understandably. But of course Zoya's there saying, hey, think of Ravka. Someone could take a look at this picture and easily see that he's your dad. She wonders why he's so willing to throw away the throne on something so sentimental. I really like this line that Nikolai uses on her saying, I'm not one of your boys, I'm your king. Zoya pretty much just had to take that and say, yep, you're my king and you're gonna get yourself killed. Because he's too dumb. She just burned his dad's picture in the fire and now she's saying he's dumb. But Zoya's sworn to protect him, so that's her whole reasoning behind that. Nikolai regrets to inform her that basically everyone already knows, or most people have guessed by now. Then Zoya suggests we should eliminate him. This makes Nikolai so upset that he actually threatens to take away her ring. She agrees that she won't try to kill his dad, and he asks her, are you really this ruthless? He says his dad was just an innocent man that loved his mother. Zoya, ever the realist, says, no, his crime was bedding your mother. Nikolai at least hopes that there was some bit of love and not just lust between his mom and dad. After all that, it's time for the chains. The chains actually feel like a relief to Nikolai after such a crazy day. He gets to retreat to his room, which is his sanctuary. The walls are even painted the blue of the sea. And he has a spyglass, even though there's not much to look at out his window. And he has a map from his ship above his mantle. He's also really grateful to have Zoya be the one to chain him up.
And not just for the obvious reasons, I'm guessing.
He really appreciates Zoya's ruthlessness at this time and knows that she'll never take any pity on him. And he's grateful that he gets to chain himself up for the most part, but then there's these 3 special locks that Zoya has to set that David made. And they go across his knees, his stomach, and his shoulders. They have to be this strong because the beast is getting stronger. Even though he's been getting chained up for a while now, he still always wants to struggle when they're put on. As Zoya's finishing chaining him up, he starts to pick on her because he knows that she goes somewhere secret every night. He asks her if it's some guy that she's actually embarrassed of. As they're having this banter back and forth about, he should mind his own business about where she goes and basically stop talking, he's glad he's chained up because he has this urge to grab her and maybe even kiss her. Nikolai really wants Zoya to stay with him and talk to him and help him get his mind off of things. He asks Zoya to talk about her past and her childhood, and she refuses. Then he brings up that he already knows everyone's story with how they got their amplifier, but he doesn't know Zoya's. And he's thinking maybe amplifiers aren't very different from Parem in the way that they amplify Agrisha's powers. Zoya says that maybe Mirzat isn't very different from Parem, but the amplifiers are something very different. These rare creatures are tied to the creation of the heart of the world. So when that animal and that source of creation gives up their life to the Grisha that's dealing the killing blow, that is the sacrifice that is required of the universe for that exchange. And with that, the bond is forever forged with the Grisha. Zoya says it's a very terrible thing, but very beautiful as well.
Zoya is very terrible and beautiful. Just kidding, I love her.
She also mentions that all Grisha actually feel a pull towards that dark magic because power is power, and everyone has to wonder what they could do with that power without any type of limitation. Nikolai's like, hey, even you? Because Zoya is such a restrained person and she's, all about Ravka and loving her country and seems to want to do the right thing. She says especially her, but the price for that type of power is too high. I still think it's interesting to see Zoya's moral compass and how she always has these high standards for herself, and she probably has those high standards for everyone around her. And she brings up that when the Darkling tried to create his own amplifiers, that's what made the Fold. That has me thinking, maybe that kind of power is still lingering in the Fold. Since this dark magic, this abomination is pretty much the opposite of Grisha using life, this magic is just all about destruction. So maybe that's what has this hold over the land in the Fold, why it's still not growing. All of the life from it's destroyed. Eventually Zoya calls out Nikolai for stalling his bedtime and not wanting her to leave, but he's not going to ask her to stay because that's not how their relationship is. Neither of them seem to rely on each other for comfort. I don't really know why he thinks this though, because she obviously did comfort him in the carriage after he had that whole ordeal at the geese farm. I mean, she definitely played into his whole married couple game, and if that wasn't some sense of comfort, then I don't know what is. And the chapter ends with him saying that he doesn't want to be left alone with what he might become. And he won't ask her to leave the lamp burning, but he's really glad that she did. And that's her comforting him. So I don't know what he's talking about how their relationship doesn't have to do with them comforting one another when Zoya clearly comforts him all the time. And she's helping him now by knowing he wants that lamp left on. And Zoya got really defensive whenever she saw the picture of his dad because she wants to protect him. And I think it goes beyond the whole I need to protect Ravka thing at this point.
That was a long one.
And that's the end of chapter 6 with Nikolai. I don't know about you guys, but even though we're not very far into the book, I'm really excited to see Zoya and Nikolai's relationship progress. I hope in this book we at least get somewhere with them, even though they're probably going to be torn apart at the end. Hey, that's chapter 6 of
39.
Just kidding. I absolutely love discussing this book with you guys. Do you guys think anyone's going to end up betraying Nikolai? When are Zoya and Nikolai finally going to realize they belong together? I'm really curious to see how this whole dating game scenario is going to be set up at this party. I really doubt the whole flying pancake explosion thing is going to go well. And thanks again for joining me. I can't wait to talk to you guys about the next chapter.